What started as a peaceful sit-down turned into a televised firestorm. Meghan Markle walked onto the set of The View expecting a respectful chat but left mid-interview, escorted by security. What happened in that studio had even Whoopi Goldberg speechless. Hit that subscribe button now, because what you're about to hear will change how you see daytime TV, media bias, and Meghan Markle forever. The cameras were still rolling when Meghan Markle stood up. Her voice was raised. Her hands were shaking. Security had already begun moving closer to the stage, sensing this was no longer a typical segment. The hosts of The View sat frozen in their chairs, the kind of television that producers pray for and publicists dread. Moments earlier, Meghan had been seated, composed, and smiling. But now, she was standing, pointing at Joy Behar, her voice filled with frustration and fury. Behind the scenes, crew members were frantically signaling to cut to commercial, but the cameras kept rolling, and what they captured would go viral. Within hours. This was not a celebrity dodging a tough question. This was a full-blown confrontation. Words were thrown, accusations made, tears nearly spilled. And when Meghan finally walked off the set, flanked by security, she left behind a storm that no one in the studio had expected, not even Whoopi. You would think that after everything Meghan has been through, she would be used to interviews. But this one was different. This time, the questions hit harder. The tone was sharper, the room colder. What started as a polite conversation about charity quickly unraveled into one of the most watched, most debated moments in daytime television history. Before we dive into how it all began, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss more behind the scenes breakdowns of media meltdowns like this one. Because what happened in that studio is more than just a dramatic interview. It is a moment that shows just how far a person can be pushed when the cameras are rolling and the questions cut deep. The day started like any other at the New York City studio where The View is filmed. The lights were being checked, mics were tested, and the audience was already buzzing with excitement. Meghan Markle had just arrived through the back entrance, greeted by producers with warm smiles and the kind of energy you expect when a big name walks into the building. Backstage, everything felt easy. There was friendly chatter between Meghan and the production team. Makeup artists touched up her look while she joked softly with her publicist. A senior producer reassured her that the segment would be light, centered around her latest humanitarian efforts, her new podcast series, and how life has changed since stepping back from royal duties. Meghan nodded, relaxed, and ready. She had done dozens of interviews before. This felt like another chance to share her mission, not relive her past. The panel was briefed to focus on her causes, not the controversies. No surprises, just a feel-good conversation. Meghan took a deep breath as she adjusted the lapel mic, then followed the stage manager down the short hallway that led to the bright set. The hosts were already seated. The studio lights were warm, the applause sign lit up, and the crowd welcomed her with loud cheers as she walked out with a soft smile and a calm wave to the audience. It looked like any other celebrity guest appearance. Meghan took her seat, exchanged quick pleasantries with Whoopi, and glanced around the table. It was supposed to be a smooth ride, but what no one realized, not Meghan, not the producers, not even the audience, was that the tone of this interview would shift fast, and once it did, there would be no going back. The smile she wore as the camera started rolling would not last long. The calm that began the morning would unravel, piece by piece, right in front of millions, watching live. As the cameras rolled and the applause died down, Whoopi leaned forward and gave Meghan a warm but steady look. She smiled, but her tone was more direct than friendly. She said, "We are here with Meghan Markle, and I have to ask, there has been a lot of talk lately about the interviews you choose. Some people say you are being very selective about who gets to ask you the hard questions." Meghan smiled and nodded. Her posture stayed upright, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her voice was calm as she answered, "I think it is important to have conversations that are productive and meaningful. I am here today because I believe in honest dialogue." The response drew a polite round of claps from the audience, but the energy in the room felt a bit uncertain. Joy Behar picked up from there. She leaned in, not aggressively, but clearly ready. "To challenge that statement, honest dialogue is great," Joy said, "but some would argue that you have been avoiding certain topics altogether. Your relationship with the royal family, For example, that seems to be off limits in a lot of your recent appearances. The room grew quiet. Meghan's smile flickered just slightly. It was not enough to call it a frown, but it was clear that she had felt the change in tone. I have been very open about my experiences, Joy, Meghan replied, her voice still steady. I think people sometimes mistake boundaries for avoidance. The tension was subtle, but growing. Meghan's face was composed, but her shoulders looked more stiff than they did just minutes earlier. She kept her eye contact, but her hands gripped each other a little tighter in her lap. The audience was watching closely now. They were not just listening to the words. They were watching the expressions, the posture, the pauses between sentences. Something had shifted. The energy on set was no longer light and upbeat. There was an edge now, quiet but sharp, and everyone in the room could feel it building. Sunny Hostin adjusted her chair slightly and looked directly at Meghan. Her tone was calm but precise, the kind that made it clear she had done her homework. Boundaries are important, sure, she said, but boundaries can also look like selective transparency. You have spoken at length about some family members, but stayed quiet about others. Do you think critics are wrong when they say you are trying to control the narrative? Meghan took a breath. She kept her eyes steady, but the smile was gone now. Her voice was firm. I think everyone has the right to protect their own story, she said. The difference is, some people's stories get told whether they want them to or not. There was a pause after that. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that comes when something real has just been said. The audience stayed quiet. The tension was climbing, and everyone could feel it. Alyssa Farah Griffin leaned in. Next, her voice was softer, but the question landed just as hard. But is it fair to want privacy and also stay in the public eye? You speak out about personal matters, then ask for space. Some people are confused. Where is the line between public and private when you are one of the most talked about people in the world? Meghan's jaw tightened. She shifted in her seat just slightly and sat up straighter. Her response came quickly. That is exactly the point. I have chosen to use my voice for causes that matter. I have chosen to speak about things that are meaningful. I am not here to feed tabloid drama. Her voice was still clear, but it had changed. The polish that opened the segment was slipping. There was more edge now, less media training, more raw emotion. The conversation started turning from polite to philosophical. What does privacy really mean when your life has been on magazine covers for years? Where is the line between self-protection and public responsibility? Meghan was holding her ground, but it was clear she was feeling pushed. She had walked onto that set ready to talk about her work, but now she was defending her right to draw the line, and that shift in tone was only the beginning. Joy leaned. Back eyes locked on Meghan, and with the kind of bluntness only she could pull off, she said, "Let us be real. Before Harry, you were on a cable show most people had never heard of. After Harry, you are sitting across from Oprah. That is not a coincidence." The studio went still. Meghan's face did not move right away, but something behind her eyes changed. The comment hit hard. Her body stiffened. Her lips parted slightly, like she could not believe what she had just heard. Meghan took a second before responding. Her voice was lower now, not shaky, but measured. "How dare you minimize my work?" she said. "I was a working actress. I had a career. I had my own projects and humanitarian work before I ever met Harry." Joy kept her gaze steady. Not minimizing it, still under control, but definitely sharper. "I earned every opportunity I have had. I did not get handed anything. I worked for it. I built it. And the idea that all of it was just given to me because of who I married is insulting." Alyssa jumped in then. "No one is saying you have not worked hard, Meghan. But let us be honest. You had Oprah, you had Netflix, you had book deals. These are not small things. People notice when you step into that kind of spotlight, especially when it comes right after leaving royal life." Meghan's jaw clenched, "And I earned every single one of those. People act like I walked into those interviews without doing anything. I was building a platform long before I ever walked down the aisle." The energy on set had changed completely. The room felt charged, like anything could happen. Meghan's calm was cracking. Her voice was louder now. Her hands were moving as she spoke, each word backed by visible frustration. She looked around the table, her eyes locking on Joy again. You can say what you want about my marriage, but do not dismiss my work. Do not act like I am just someone who rode in on a royal title. That is exactly the kind of narrative I have. Spent years trying to fight the audience, did not know whether to clap or stay quiet. Meghan had gone from graceful guest to someone clearly fighting to be heard, and for the first time in the segment, it felt like the gloves were off. Meghan's voice dropped just a little, and her eyes softened, but the tension in her body stayed. She took a breath and said, "What people forget is the damage this constant scrutiny does. The headlines, the lies, the judgment. Every day, waking up to another story about me, about my family. It is not just annoying, it is painful." The panel stayed quiet for a moment. Meghan looked around the table, and for the first time since the interview began, there was no filter in her tone. "I have dealt with anxiety, depression, panic. I have had to fight through things most people never see, and still, people act like I should just smile and carry on." Her voice started to crack. "This is not about fame. It is not about attention. It is about staying sane. It is about protecting my peace, my children, and my sense of self. I am not asking for pity. I am asking for space." Joy, who had been watching closely, leaned forward. She did not raise her voice. Her tone was quieter now, but still firm. "If it hurts that much, then why stay in the spotlight? Why keep giving interviews, writing books, filming shows? It looks like you are choosing this." The room was completely silent. Even the audience had stopped reacting. Every eye was on Meghan. She looked down for half a second, then looked back up, her voice rising with emotion. "Because my strategy is to survive. That is it, to survive. This is how I rebuild. This is how I take back control of my life. People think it is about fame. It is not. It is about finding purpose after being torn apart." Her hands were moving more now, her tone filled with frustration. "People act like I am playing a game. I am not. I am trying to stay standing, to use my story to help others, to be more than just the headlines they print." The mood on set had shifted completely. No one interrupted. The weight of her words filled the air. Even the crew in the background looked frozen. The sharp edges of earlier questions were now covered by something heavier. Meghan sat back in her chair, still breathing hard. She had not planned to go there, not today. But it was clear the moment had taken over. She was no longer a polished guest. She was a woman on the edge, holding onto her voice with everything she had. Sunny leaned forward again, her tone calm but unmistakably serious. "Meghan, your words have weight. When you speak, people listen. But your words also have consequences for others, especially those who cannot respond the same way you can." Meghan's head snapped toward her. Her voice came back sharp. "And what about the consequences for me? What about the press that dragged me every single day? What about the palace silence, the betrayal from my own family, the people who sold stories just to make a quick check?" The panel stayed quiet, but the tension was rising fast. Meghan was no longer sitting back. She was leaning in, her voice louder with each word. "People talk about accountability like it only goes one way," she said, "but I was the one left unprotected. I was the one whose life got picked apart while everyone else stayed quiet." Joy crossed her arms. "You keep saying you were silenced, but you have spoken out more than almost anyone. Books, podcasts, Netflix, it seems. Like you have had plenty of chances to share your truth." That line set everything off. Meghan's voice jumped instantly, because nobody else was telling it honestly. "I had to speak up, or let them erase who I am." Alyssa tried to jump in, but Meghan cut her off. "Do not act like I have some unfair advantage. I had no one, no team, no protection, just my own voice, and I have had to fight to keep even that." The yelling started then, not just raised voices, actual shouting. Sunny tried to calm it down, but it was no use. Whoopi raised her hand. Okay, everybody just take a breath. Let us bring it down." But it was too late. Meghan stood up, her hands shaking slightly. She looked around the table, her eyes glassy but intense. "This," she said, pointing at the panel, "this is exactly why people do not trust the media. You pretend you want honesty, you pretend you want the truth, but what you really want is to trap people and break them down in front of cameras." Her voice cracked on the last words. The control was gone. Whatever guard she had walked in with had shattered. She was not debating anymore. She was defending herself from something that felt personal and cruel, and no one knew what to say next. Meghan's voice was shaking now, but louder than ever. She pointed directly at the hosts, her frustration spilling over. This was supposed to be a real conversation, not an ambush. "You brought me here just to twist everything I say." Joy raised her hands in defense. "We are just asking questions, Meghan. You are the one turning this into something else." Meghan stepped forward, her voice rising above the chatter. "You do not care about understanding me. You care about ratings. You care about getting a moment that will go viral. That is all this ever was to you." Whoopi tried to jump in again, her voice calm but firm. "Let us take a breath here. This is getting out of control, but it was already too late." Alyssa leaned forward. "If you came here thinking you would only get praise, then maybe you chose the wrong show. That pushed things past the breaking point." Meghan turned to the entire panel, her voice almost a shout now. "You think I came here for praise? I came here in good faith, to talk about real work, real advocacy. And instead, I get interrogated, like I am on trial." Security had already started moving quietly onto the set. The producers were signaling from behind the cameras, trying to regain control of the chaos. But there was no pulling this back. Meghan grabbed her purse, her hands visibly shaking. "I am done with this treatment," she said, her voice echoing across the studio. "I will not sit here and be attacked while you pretend it is journalism." She turned and walked off, not looking back. Her heels clicked against the floor, each step louder than the last. The room stayed frozen. The panel sat in stunned silence. Security lingered for a second before quietly stepping back. The cameras kept rolling as Whoopi finally looked up and said, "We will be right back." But no one really knew what to say. The interview was over, and no one would forget how it ended. The studio sat in complete silence. No music, no chatter, just a thick tension hanging in the air. The hosts stared at the empty seat Meghan had left behind. No one moved, no one spoke. Whoopi finally turned to the camera. Her voice was steady, but you could hear the weight behind. "It will be right back after this short break." The screen faded, but the moment had already burned itself into everyone's memory. Behind the scenes, crew members whispered to each other. Was she set up? Was this part of the plan? Some were shaking their heads, others just looked stunned. Even the panel, who were no strangers to controversy, seemed unsure what had just happened. The audience was split. Some clapped, others sat. Frozen, people were already pulling out their phones. The clip was spreading online before the segment had even ended. Within minutes, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube were flooded with reactions. Some called Meghan brave, others said she had finally shown her true colors. News outlets replayed the footage on loop. Podcasts were already planning emergency episodes. The moment had turned into a cultural flashpoint, and everyone had something to say. But what about you? Was Meghan justified in walking off? Or did she crack under pressure? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you want more explosive moments like this one, more real, raw showdowns that you will not see anywhere else, make sure to hit that subscribe button. This was not just an interview. It was a breaking point, and everyone felt it.